With the inheritance I received from my late husband, Marcus, I purchased a farm hoping to finally find some peace and quiet. Not long after settling in, my son Andre gave me a call. "Just stay put in the garage for a few days, Mom," he instructed. "I'm bringing Kiara's parents and a few friends up to the farm. If you embarrass us in any way, I'm checking you into an assisted living facility, got it?" I didn't utter a single word in response, but when they all arrived, they were definitely in for a huge surprise. I'm truly glad you're reading this. Follow my story until the very end, and please let me know what city you're reading from. That way I can get an idea of just how far my story has traveled. My name is Dahlia Ellington. I'm 60 years old, and I honestly never imagined that the worst betrayal of my entire life would come at the hands of my own son. It all started about 3 months after Marcus's funeral. My husband of 35 wonderful years was gone, and I could still deeply feel the incredible emptiness he'd left behind in our bed, in the kitchen where we used to enjoy breakfast together every single morning, and in practically every single corner of the house we had built with so much love and care. Discovering the life insurance policy that Marcus had kept a complete secret from me was quite a surprise. It was an enormous sum of money, definitely more than we had ever possessed before. It was truly enough money to completely transform my life. For weeks, the money just sat untouched in the bank account, while I continued to grieve the devastating loss of the only man who had ever truly loved me with all his heart. Marcus had always dreamed of owning a small farm situated in the North Georgia countryside. A peaceful place where we could raise a few animals and grow our very own vegetables. "When I finally retire," he'd always tell me while gently stroking my hair, "we'll buy that beautiful farm and finally live far away from all that horrible city noise." Sadly, Marcus passed away long before he could retire, before he could ever fulfill that lifelong dream. That's precisely when I decided that I would do it for him, for us. For all the wonderful years we had spent meticulously planning that quiet, peaceful life on the farm. It was a chance at a new beginning, but it also came with a very harsh demand. The farm I eventually found was located about 2 hours outside of Atlanta, Georgia, beautifully surrounded by gorgeous green hills, with a small creek peacefully running right through the property. The main house was modest, but it was solid and contained 3 bedrooms, a large kitchen that overlooked the beautiful garden, and a wonderful porch where I could easily picture myself sitting every single sunset. There were also stalls for horses, even though I honestly had no idea how to properly care for them, and enough land to plant absolutely whatever my heart desired. The asking price was $350,000, which thankfully left me with $150,000 for renovations and initial expenses. I signed all of the official papers on a Tuesday morning, literally trembling with excitement. It was the very first important decision that I had made without Marcus, but I just knew that he would be incredibly proud of me. That very afternoon, completely unable to contain my overwhelming joy, I called Andre, my only child. "Mom." His voice sounded noticeably surprised. Andre was 38 years old and worked as a manager at an insurance company. He and his wife, Kiara, had been living in the city for 5 years. "Everything's perfectly fine, Andre," I said, feeling my heart pounding with pure, unadulterated happiness. "Son, I have wonderful news. I bought a farm, a beautiful farm in the country, just like your father and I always dreamed of." The silence on the other end of the telephone line lasted for so long that I actually thought the call had been disconnected. "You bought what?" His tone had changed completely. It was flat and incredibly cold. "A farm, Andre. It's absolutely perfect. It has everything I need, and there's plenty of space for when you and Kiara come to visit. You could even stay on the weekends. Bring the grandkids when you have them." "Mom, have you completely lost your mind?" His voice suddenly turned harsh and cruel. "What money did you use to buy a farm? Please don't tell me you blew Dad's insurance money on that stupid thing." I was completely speechless. Stupid thing. That's exactly what he called the dream his father and I had shared for decades. "Andre, I thought you'd be happy. It's a truly beautiful place, and there's enough room for the whole family." "Mom, listen to me very closely," he interrupted, and I could clearly hear Kiara talking in the background. although I couldn't quite make out exactly what she was saying. I already have plans for this coming weekend. Kiera wants to bring her parents and a few friends up to see the farm. My heart immediately filled with hope. Maybe he had reacted badly at first, but now he actually wanted to visit. How wonderful, son. I'll get the guest rooms ready and cook something truly special. It's been far too long since I've seen Kiera. No, Mom. Listen to me very well because I'm definitely not going to repeat it. His voice was incredibly cold and calculating. You're going to fix up the garage for yourself. Do you understand? Kiera doesn't want her parents thinking that we can't afford a decent vacation spot. If you embarrass us in any way, if you make any comments that are out of line, or if you act like the pathetic old woman you've become, I'll check you into a nursing home so fast that you won't even know how you got there. His words hit me like physical blows. I truly felt like I couldn't breathe, that the walls of my new kitchen were actually closing in on me. My very own son was asking me to sleep in a garage as if I were some kind of stray animal. Andre, I whispered, my voice breaking with emotion. Why are you talking to me like this? I'm your mother. You're a burden, Mom. You have been ever since Dad died. Kiera and I had plans for that insurance money. Real plans, not farm fantasies like a 5-year-old kid. But the money, it was Dad's and I'm his son. I had much more right to decide what to do with it than you did. I could then hear Kiera laughing in the background. We'll see you Friday night. Have the garage ready and please don't make us look bad. He then hung up the phone without even saying goodbye. I just stood there holding the phone to my ear, listening to the dial tone as tears streamed down my cheeks. In my new kitchen, completely surrounded by unpacked boxes and dreams that were just waiting to be built, I honestly felt lonelier than ever before. But amidst that overwhelming sadness, something else began to stir within me. It was something that had been dormant for many years, of being the perfect wife, the perfect mother, and the woman who always yielded and easily forgave. It was a spark of something that Marcus had seen in me when we were young, but which I had buried under layers of domesticity and sacrifice. Andre had made a mistake, a very big mistake, because if he wanted to play dirty, he was definitely about to discover that his mother knew that particular game much better than he could ever possibly imagine. The truth was finally revealed. The 3 days following that absolutely horrible phone call were the strangest of my life. On the outside, I was still the same Dahlia I'd always been, unpacking boxes, organizing the house, and trying to adapt to farm life. But deep inside, something had changed forever. That very night after Andre's terrible phone call, I couldn't sleep at all. I stayed awake until dawn, sitting on the porch, looking up at the stars, and replaying my son's incredibly hurtful words over and over again. A burden, pathetic old woman. I'll check you into a nursing home. Each phrase was like an open wound that simply wouldn't stop bleeding. But when the sun finally rose, a cold determination that I hadn't felt in decades had been born with the new day. On Wednesday morning, while I was cleaning out the garage to make it my temporary room, I found an old box that the previous owners had left behind. Inside were some unimportant papers and an antique landline telephone that still actually worked. I plugged it in the garage, thinking that I might actually need it. It was on that very same day that I overheard the first truly shocking conversation. I was organizing some old blankets when the main house phone rang. There was an extension in the garage, and by sheer coincidence, I picked up the receiver at the same time that someone answered the phone in the house. It was Andre. Kiera, it's me, my son said, and something in his tone made me stay perfectly still without hanging up the phone. Did you talk to the old woman? My daughter-in-law's voice sounded incredibly dismissive and bored. Yeah, I told her to sleep in the garage. She started crying as usual, but she'll definitely obey. Kiera then laughed. Perfect. My parents are definitely going to be impressed with the place. How much did you actually say it cost? I told them that it cost $500,000, not $350,000. I really want them to think that we have much more money than we actually do. Smart. And after the weekend, when do we start the plan? My blood instantly ran cold. What plan? Give her 1 more month, Andre replied. Let her get settled in. Let her feel secure. Then we start the psychological pressure. You know those doctors who declare people mentally incompetent, right? My cousin's a psychiatrist. He'll sign absolutely any paper we need for $5,000. Perfect. Once we declare her legally incompetent, I, as the only child, will have legal power over all of her properties. We'll then sell this farm and keep all of the money. And what exactly do we do with her? We put her in the cheapest nursing home we can find. Hopefully she won't last very long there. Old people tend to die quickly once they're taken out of their familiar environment. Kiera then laughed again, a truly cruel sound that cut right through me like a knife. You're diabolical, Andre. I like it. I learned from the best. My father was far too soft on her. I'm definitely not going to make the same mistake. Do you actually think she suspects anything? My mom is far too clueless and sentimental. She still thinks that I'm her perfect little boy. I could literally steal her dentures, and she'd still find a way to justify it. They then hung up the phone, and I stayed seated on the garage floor while holding the phone with trembling hands. My own son, my only son, the baby that I had carried for 9 long months, the child that I had stayed up with whenever he had a fever, the boy that I had always defended from every teacher and principal who complained about his behavior. That very child was now planning to steal absolutely everything that I had and lock me away in a home to die completely alone. But something else was really bothering me. Andre had mentioned that he had learned from the best. What exactly did he mean by that? Marcus had never been cruel to me. Never. It had to be the hidden folder. That very night, I decided to carefully go through the boxes that I hadn't unpacked yet. They were mostly Marcus's papers, work documents, old bills, and family photos. But at the very bottom of one of the boxes, I found something that took my breath away. It was a folder clearly marked Andre Confidential, in Marcus's handwriting. Inside were letters, printed emails, and handwritten notes. With my heart pounding faster and faster, I began reading. The very first letter was from Andre, dated 3 years ago. Dad, I urgently need you to lend me $10,000. It's a completely secure investment. I'll pay you back in 6 months with interest. Mom can't know about this because you know how she gets about money. Marcus's reply was handwritten on the margin. Andre, this is the 5th time you've asked me for money this year. What is really going on? And please don't tell me that it's for an investment because the other 4 times you said the exact same thing, and I never saw a single penny back. I kept on reading. There were documents showing that Andre had constantly asked Marcus for money over the past 5 years. Always with different excuses, job problems, a medical emergency for Kiera, investments that turned out to be complete scams, and hidden gambling debts. In total, Marcus had lent him over $80,000 that Andre had never repaid. But what hurt me the absolute most was finding a letter that Marcus had written but had never actually sent. Dahlia, my love, if you are reading this, it means that I am no longer with you. There are things about Andre that I never told you because I never wanted to hurt you. Our son is definitely not the man that we think he is. He has lied to me. He has stolen from me. And he has manipulated me for years. But the worst part of it all is that he has actually threatened me. He told me that if I ever told you the truth about him, he would find a way to hurt you. That's exactly why I kept silent. That's why I let him remain your perfect little boy. But I fear for you, Dahlia. I fear what he will do when I'm no longer here to protect you. Please be very careful. Don't trust him. And always remember that you were always much stronger than you believed. Tears soaked the paper as I read the final lines. Marcus had known all this time exactly who Andre really was, but he had kept the secret in order to protect me. At that exact moment, I heard a car pull up outside. Andre and Kiera had arrived a day earlier than planned. I quickly put all of the documents away and ran to the garage, pretending that I had been resting. Through the small window, I watched them enter the house as if it were already theirs, turning on lights, opening cabinets, and commenting on what changes they would make when it was officially theirs. But I was no longer the same woman who had cried in this very garage just 3 days ago. Now I had information. I had proof. And a plan was definitely beginning to form in my mind. Andre and Kiera had come to humiliate me, to treat me like a servant in my own house, and to begin the process of completely destroying my life. What they didn't realize was that their perfect victim had vanished forever. The confrontation dinner. On Friday evening, Kiera's parents arrived along with two other couples. From my window in the garage, I watched them step out of a black Mercedes-Benz, dressed in incredibly expensive clothes, and commenting on just how picturesque the place actually was. Kiera greeted them warmly at the front door as if she were the actual lady of the house, while Andre carried their luggage with a smile that I knew far too well, the very same fake smile he'd used since he was a child whenever he wanted something. I stayed in the garage until Andre came looking for me. "Mom, come out of there. Kiera wants you to prepare dinner for 8 people. His tone was a mix of command and obvious disdain. "And please put on something decent. You look like a complete vagrant." I was wearing the same blue blouse that Marcus had given me for our last anniversary. It was one of my absolute favorites, but under Andre's critical gaze, I suddenly felt incredibly small and disheveled. I entered the house that I had purchased with my own hard-earned money and headed straight to the kitchen. The guests were all in the living room drinking wine and laughing. I could hear fragments of their conversation. Andre was just telling us about this brilliant investment. Kiera's father, Mr. Clayton, a portly man with a gray mustache, was saying, $500,000 for a property that's already worth $700,000. He definitely has a good eye for business. Kiera then laughed, a musical sound that she had perfected specifically for these kinds of occasions. "My husband is very shrewd. He always finds the best opportunities." They were brazenly lying about the farm's price, inflating it by over $300,000. But I kept quiet, preparing roasted chicken with side dishes while carefully listening to every single word. "And his mother?" asked one of Kiera's friends. "Does she actually live here with you?" There was an awkward pause before Andre responded. "My mother is complicated. She hasn't been mentally well ever since my father died. We're taking care of her, but it's quite difficult." "Oh, the poor thing," another voice murmured. "That must be so hard on you." "It is," Kiera sighed with completely false sadness. "But Andre is so incredibly patient with her. I honestly don't know if I would actually have his strength." I stood motionless by the oven, feeling the kitchen's heat was nothing compared to the overwhelming fury that was rising in my chest. They were painting me as a senile old woman who was completely dependent on their kindness, as if they were the martyrs and I was simply a burden. When I finished preparing dinner, Andre came to inspect my work. He tasted the gravy and frowned deeply. "It's far too salty. Make it again." "Andre, the gravy is absolutely perfect. I've been making it this way for 30 years, and your father absolutely loved it." "My father isn't here anymore, and our guests definitely won't like it. Make it again, and please don't contradict me in front of them." I was about to protest when Kiera appeared in the kitchen. She was wearing a sleek black dress and jewelry that cost more than my car. She looked me up and down with barely concealed disdain. "Is dinner ready? Our guests are definitely waiting." "Almost," I murmured, starting to make a new batch of gravy. "Good. And Andre told me that you've been having trouble remembering things lately." Her voice was sweet, but her eyes were as cold as ice. "Is it actually true that you forgot to turn off the stove yesterday?" It was a complete lie. I had never forgotten to turn off anything, but I could definitely see where this conversation was going. "I didn't forget anything, Kiera." She then exchanged a significant look with Andre. "Well, we all get older. It's perfectly natural for the mind to start failing. My mind is perfectly fine." "Of course, dear." Her smile was incredibly condescending. "That's why it's so important to have someone to properly look after you." During dinner, they treated me like an invisible servant. I served the plates, refilled the wine glasses, and cleaned up any spills while they all talked as if I simply didn't exist. But when Andre started telling the story of how he had convinced his mother to buy the farm, I just couldn't stay silent any longer. "Actually," I said from where I was collecting plates, "I decided to buy the farm because it was the dream that Marcus and I had shared for decades. The silence at the table was immediate and incredibly tense. Andre glared at me. Mom, the adults are talking. I am an adult, Andre. And this is my house. Kiera nervously cleared her throat. Of course it's your house, Mrs. Ellington. Andre just meant. I knew exactly what Andre meant. My voice was firmer than it had been in days, just as I know exactly why all of you are here. Kiera's father frowned, confused. Excuse me. Andre abruptly stood up from his chair. Mom, I honestly think it's time for you to leave. Are you confused? I'm not confused at all. I then addressed Kiera's father directly. Your son-in-law told you that this farm cost $500,000, right? The man slowly nodded, clearly uncomfortable with the tension that had seized the room. Interesting, because I have the purchase papers right here, clearly showing that I paid $350,000. I pulled the documents from my apron pocket and placed them on the table. Why do you think Andre would lie to you about that? Kiera visibly paled. Mrs. Ellington, I really think you're confused about. I also have these right here. I continued, pulling out even more papers. Documents showing that Andre borrowed over $80,000 from my late husband over the past 5 years. Money that he never paid back. Mom, shut up. Andre yelled, but it was already far too late. The guests looked at the documents with expressions of shock and utter confusion. The festive atmosphere had completely vanished. And the most interesting thing of all, I said, my voice now completely calm and controlled, is that yesterday I overheard a very revealing phone conversation between Andre and Kiera about their plans to declare me mentally incompetent and sell my property. The silence that followed was absolutely deafening. I could clearly hear the kitchen clock ticking and Andre's agitated breathing. Kiera attempted a desperate last move. This is exactly what we wanted to avoid. As you can clearly see, she's having one of her episodes. Andre, maybe we should call the doctor. Episodes? I laughed, a harsh sound that I hadn't heard leave my throat in years. You're still going to lie, even now? I then pulled out my phone, the very same one that I had used to record the conversation that they had had that very afternoon, meticulously planning all of the details of their despicable scheme. Do you actually want to hear exactly what they said about me just 3 hours ago? Andre lunged toward me, desperately trying to snatch the phone, but I had already pressed play. His own voice then filled the dining room, clear and cruel, a mother's strength. The old woman is completely under control. By Monday, I'll have the psychiatrist's papers. In 2 weeks, this farm will be ours. Kiera's parents stood up simultaneously, their faces showing a mixture of complete horror and utter disgust. The other couples exchanged uncomfortable glances and then began to murmur among themselves. Andre, Mr. Clayton said in a tense voice, I think we actually need an explanation. But Andre could no longer maintain his mask of the devoted son. His face had completely transformed into something that I recognized from his childhood. The expression of a child who had been caught in a lie, willing to do absolutely anything to get his way. She has no right to anything. He finally exploded. That money should have been mine. I'm her only son. And there it was. The truth that he had been hiding behind fake smiles and feigned concern. The truth that Marcus had seen but had never told me. My son didn't love me. He never had. He had only ever seen me as a source of money. And when that source ran dry, I was just an obstacle that needed to be quickly removed. The dining room had become a silent battlefield. The guests remained motionless like statues, witnesses to a terrible family tragedy that was unfolding right before their very eyes. Andre breathed heavily, his fists clenched tightly at his sides, while Kiera desperately tried to find a way out of the incredibly difficult situation. Andre, Mr. Clayton murmured, his voice heavy with disappointment. What exactly does all of this mean? My son ran his hands through his hair, a nervous habit that he'd had since he was a boy. For a brief moment, I thought that perhaps he would apologize, that he would find some vestige of the conscience that I had tried so hard to instill in him for so many years. But when he looked up, his eyes gleamed with a chilling rage. It means my mother is a manipulative old woman who is trying to ruin my life. He spat the words out like venom. All of this is a complete lie. She recorded that conversation entirely out of context. Out of context? I couldn't help but laugh. A rough sound that echoed throughout the room. Andre, explain to me in what context it is actually acceptable to plan to steal everything from your mother and lock her in a nursing home. Kiera rose abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. This is absolutely ridiculous, Andre. Let's just go. We don't actually have to tolerate these accusations. Sit down, Kiera. The voice came from Mr. Clayton. But it wasn't a suggestion. It was an order. The man had been a judge for 30 long years before retiring, and his judicial tone had automatically surfaced. I want to hear the rest of that recording. Dad, you don't have to, Kiera began. But he quickly silenced her with a sharp look. I turned up the volume on the phone. Kiera's voice was heard clearly. My cousin can sign the mental incapacity papers for $5,000. He even knows judges who will help us. Mr. Clayton's face hardened like granite. His wife, an elegant woman who hadn't said a single word all night, brought a hand to her chest. Your cousin, the psychiatrist? He asked slowly. The one that you introduced to us just last year. Kiera had lost all color in her face. Dad, I can explain. No. His voice cracked like a whip. There is absolutely no explanation for this. But Andre wasn't going to give up without a fight. He approached me with menacing steps. And for the very first time in my entire life, I felt real fear of my own son. You know what, Mom? You're right. Yes, I planned all of it. And you know why? His voice got higher, shriller. Because you deserve it. Because my whole life has been a complete burden. Dad and I had to constantly lie to you in order to protect your precious feelings. We had to pretend that you were actually important when you were really just nothing. The word was like a slap in the face, but strangely enough it didn't sting anymore. It's hard to articulate the feeling you get when you finally see someone for who they truly are. The Andre I had loved, the son for whom I had made so many sacrifices, had never really been there. He was just an illusion, a figment of my imagination that I had created to fill the emptiness in my heart. Did you know? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Of course he knew. He's the one who taught me how to manipulate you. Give her what she wants to hear, Andre, he'd say. It's easier than dealing with her dramas. Do you honestly think he cared about you? He just tolerated you because he was too much of a coward to leave. That lie did sting because deep down, I knew it was a calculated attempt to wound me. Marcus had genuinely loved me. The letters I had discovered were proof of that. He had kept quiet about Andre to protect me, not because he didn't have feelings for me. Dad loved you, Andre, I said, my voice tinged with sadness. That's why he never told me what you were really like, because he knew it would break me. Dad was a sentimental fool, Andre retorted, raising his voice. And you're even worse. At that moment, one of Kiera's friends stood up. He was an older, distinguished gentleman who had been listening intently. Excuse me, he said, turning his attention to me. But you mentioned that you have recordings of this conspiracy? I nodded, my gaze still fixed on Andre, who was now pacing back and forth like a caged animal. And documents proving the unreturned loans, all signed by Andre, I confirmed. The man nodded thoughtfully. I'm an attorney specializing in family law. What you've just described constitutes several crimes, including conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted extortion, and potentially other charges as well. Andre froze in his tracks. What are you implying? I'm saying your mother has enough evidence to press criminal charges against you and your wife. Kiera slumped back in her chair, finally grasping the full extent of what they had done. Andre, you assured me this wasn't risky. You said it was harmless. Shut up. Andre screamed at her, but it was too late. Kiera's parents exchanged a look, and I could see the exact moment they reached their decision. Mrs. Clayton spoke for the first time that evening. Kiera, pack your things. We're leaving now. Mom, please. I said now. Her voice brooked no argument. And when we get home, you're going to explain to me how we raised a daughter capable of something like this. The other guests also began to rise, clearly uncomfortable and eager to escape the awkward situation. Within minutes, the house was empty, except for Andre, Kiera, and me. Andre approached me one last time, and I saw something in his eyes that frightened me more than his anger. An absolute coldness, as if he had decided that I no longer existed in his world. "This isn't over," he said in a low, menacing voice. "I'll find a way to take everything from you. I promise." "No, Andre." My voice was stronger than it had been in years. "This is completely over." I pulled out another set of papers from my apron, documents I had prepared after discovering Marcus' letters. "These are documents transferring the ownership of this farm into an irrevocable trust." I paused for emphasis. "You are not the beneficiary. In fact, there's a specific clause that excludes you from any inheritance should you attempt to declare me incompetent or manipulate me in any way." Andre snatched the papers from my hands, reading them frantically. His face went from shock to dawning comprehension to absolute, unadulterated fury. "You can't do this. I'm your son." "No," I said, with a calmness that surprised even myself. "A son doesn't try to destroy his mother. A son doesn't plot to steal everything she owns. A son doesn't threaten to lock her away in a nursing home to die alone." Kiera had been peering over Andre's shoulder as he read. "What exactly does this mean?" "It means," I replied, "that when I die, this property and all my remaining money will go to a charity that helps elderly victims of familial abuse. Andre won't receive a single penny." "You vindictive old witch." Andre threw the papers on the floor in disgust. You always knew. You always knew you weren't a good mother." His words bounced off me without causing any harm. It was as if I had developed an invisible shield against his cruelty. "You're right about one thing, Andre. I wasn't a good mother because a good mother would have set boundaries. A good mother wouldn't have allowed you to become this." They headed toward the door, Andre muttering threats and curses under his breath, Kiera crying and trying to reason with him. But before leaving, Andre turned back one last time. "This isn't love," he said with a cruel, twisted smile. "This is pure hatred." "No, Andre," I replied softly. "This is self-love." After they left, I was left alone in my kitchen, surrounded by dirty dishes and half-finished wine glasses. But for the first time in months, maybe even years, I felt completely at peace. I had lost a son, but I had found something far more valuable, my own dignity. And this time no one was going to take it away from me. The refuge. The days following that confrontation were the strangest of my life. It was as if I had suddenly awakened from a decades-long dream, a dream in which I had lived my life for others while completely losing sight of myself. For the first time in 60 years, I didn't have to worry about anyone's expectations but my own. On Monday morning, as I was enjoying a cup of coffee on my porch and watching the sunrise paint the hills with vibrant colors, I heard a car approaching on the gravel path. My initial instinct was panic. Had Andre come back to make good on his threats? But when I recognized the blue car, my heart calmed down. It was the lawyer who had been at the dinner party, David Hayes, Kiera's friend, who had witnessed the entire confrontation. "Mrs. Ellington," he said as he got out of the car. "I hope I'm not bothering you this early." "Not at all," I replied, gesturing for him to sit on the porch. "Would you care for some coffee?" "I'd love some." He settled into one of the wicker chairs that Marcus had bought years ago. "I came because I haven't been able to stop thinking about what happened Friday night," he explained. I poured him coffee into a delicate porcelain cup that had belonged to my mother. "I have a mother who is 75 years old," he continued softly. "And what I witnessed on Friday reminded me of how vulnerable older people can be when their own family turns against them." "I'm not vulnerable," I replied automatically, but he simply smiled. "No, you definitely are not. In fact, I think you're one of the strongest women I've ever met. But that doesn't mean you don't need legal protection." He explained that Andre and Kiera likely wouldn't give up easily, and that they would probably try to find other ways to invalidate the trust, perhaps by claiming that I had been manipulated by someone else into signing it. They can try that, but I have a better idea. His eyes twinkled with what looked like mischief. How about we preempt their moves? That same afternoon, David returned with a full team. There was a forensic psychologist who could certify my mental competency, an accountant who would meticulously review all my finances to demonstrate that I hadn't been coerced, and a social worker specializing in elder abuse. This is excessive, I protested, watching them install a security camera in my living room. Mrs. Ellington, David said patiently, your son threatened you directly. He said he would find a way to take everything from you. We have to be prepared. He was right, of course. That very night, Andre called. Mom. His voice was different now, controlled, as if he had been carefully rehearsing what he was going to say. I've been thinking about what happened. I think we both said things we didn't really mean. I meant every word I said, Andre. Mom, I know you're angry, but we're family. We can fix this. Fix what exactly? The fact that you plotted to rob me, or the fact that you wanted to lock me in a nursing home to die alone? There was a long pregnant pause. When he spoke again, his voice had lost all pretense of remorse. You have 72 hours to reverse that transfer to the trust. Or what? Or you'll find out what I'm really capable of when I set my mind to something. He hung up before I could even respond. David was right. Andre wasn't going to give up without a fight. The next day the attacks began. First, there were the phone calls at all hours of the day and night, Andre alternating between tearful pleas for forgiveness and outright threats. Then came the unexpected visits. He would show up at the door at all hours, sometimes alone, sometimes with Kiera, always demanding to talk. Mom, open the door. I know you're in there. Mom, this is ridiculous. I'm your son. Mom, if you don't open this door, I'm calling Adult Protective Services and telling them you've been abandoned here. But I didn't budge. David had advised me not to have any direct contact with them, and every visit was being meticulously recorded by the security cameras he had installed. On Wednesday, Andre escalated his tactics. He arrived with a man who introduced himself as a doctor and shouted through the door that he had a court order to evaluate my mental state. Mrs. Ellington, the supposed doctor yelled, your son is worried about your well-being. We just want to make sure you're okay. I immediately called David. There is no court order, he assured me after making a few quick calls. That man isn't even a doctor. He's an actor Andre hired. On Thursday night, Andre brought reinforcements. He arrived with Kiera, her parents, and two men I didn't recognize. This time they didn't leave when I didn't open the door. Mom, Andre yelled. These gentlemen are from Adult Protective Services. They're here because we're worried about you. I watched from my bedroom window. The officials were wearing ill-fitting, cheap suits, and one of them was brazenly smoking a cigarette. Real officials would never have behaved like that. David, I whispered into the phone, my voice trembling. They're here again. This time they brought people who claim to be from the government. I'm on my way. Do not go outside under any circumstances. But Andre had clearly lost his patience. I heard a loud crash, as if someone had slammed against the back door. Then came the unmistakable sound of breaking glass. They had smashed the kitchen window. Mom! Andre's voice came from inside the house. Come out now. We just want to help you. I hid in my bedroom closet, my heart pounding so loudly that I thought they could hear it. I listened to their footsteps echoing through the house, opening doors, shouting my name. We know you're here, Mom. Your car is outside. Then I heard Kiera's voice laced with panic. Andre, this is wrong. We're committing breaking and entering. Shut up. She's my mother, and this is the house that should rightfully be mine. The footsteps were getting closer and closer to my bedroom. I was certain they were about to find me when I suddenly heard the piercing wail of sirens. David had called the police. Police! Everyone out with your hands up. I heard shouting, running footsteps, doors slamming shut, then complete and utter silence. When I finally mustered the courage to come out of the closet, I found David waiting for me in the living room, surrounded by police officers. "Are you okay?" he asked, his eyes scanning me for any sign of injuries. "I'm fine," I replied, my voice still shaking. "What happened to Andre?" "He's been arrested breaking and entering, property damage, harassment." Kiera too. I sank heavily onto my sofa, trembling from the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "How did you know they were coming?" "The cameras are connected to my phone. I saw everything that happened." He showed me his cell phone, where I could clearly see the recording of Andre smashing the window. This, plus all the recordings of the phone threats, should be enough to get a permanent restraining order. That night, alone in my house with temporarily repaired windows and newly installed locks, I realized something profound. Andre had crossed a line from which there was no return. It was no longer just about greed or manipulation. It was real, tangible violence. My own son had become a physical threat to me. But strangely, I didn't feel fear. I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades: power. The power to decide my own fate, to protect myself, to say no and have it respected. Andre had come to take everything I had, but instead, he had inadvertently given me the most valuable gift I could possibly imagine. The opportunity to discover who I truly was when no one else had any power over me. And this time, no one was ever going to take that away from me. Finding peace. 6 months after Andre's arrest, I woke up on my farm, as I had every morning since then, completely at peace. The sun streamed through the new curtains I had bought, cheerful curtains with yellow flowers that Marcus would have absolutely loved. I no longer lived in a house filled with painful memories and regrets. Now, I lived in a home that was entirely mine. The restraining order had been made permanent after the trial. Andre had been sentenced to a year of probation for breaking and entering and harassment. Kiera, surprisingly, had cooperated with the authorities in exchange for a reduced sentence. During the legal proceedings, she had revealed even more details about Andre's twisted plans, including his intention to drug me to make it appear as though I had dementia. "I never thought he'd go that far," Kiera had testified through her tears. "At first it was just talk about money, but then he became completely obsessed. He said you had stolen his inheritance." Kiera's parents had completely distanced themselves from the situation. Mr. Clayton, the former judge, had even come to apologize personally. "We raised our daughter to be better than this," he had told me, sitting on the same porch where everything had begun. "You are not responsible for Kiera's choices, just as I am not responsible for Andre's," I had replied. It had been a healing conversation for both of us. This particular morning felt extra special. It was the first anniversary of my purchase of the farm, and I had decided to celebrate it in a way that I knew Marcus would have wholeheartedly approved of. David arrived early as promised. In recent months he had become not only my attorney but also a genuine friend. He brought with him a woman named Sarah Jenkins, the director of an organization that helped victims of family abuse. "Dahlia," Sarah said, her eyes sweeping over my property. "This is absolutely perfect." During the months of emotional recovery, I had spent a lot of time thinking about what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I was 60 years old, in good health, and had more money than I needed to live comfortably. But more importantly, I had first-hand experience in something that no one ever wants to experience. I knew what it was like to be betrayed by your own family. "Are you sure this will actually work?" I asked as we walked toward the stables that I had converted into small, cozy cottages. "It will work," Sarah assured me. "There are so many older women in situations similar to yours, women who desperately need a safe place to rebuild their shattered lives." I had decided to transform my farm into a temporary refuge for elderly women who had been victims of abuse or family abandonment. It wasn't going to be a large, impersonal institution or a complex organization. It was simply going to be a place where women like me could find peace, security, and the time they needed to heal. The first 3 residents arrived that very afternoon. Margaret was 68 and had been unceremoniously thrown out of her house by her son after he got married. My daughter-in-law said I was a burden. She told me as I showed her to her cottage. 40 years living in that house, and they threw me out like a dog. Elaine, 72, had been a victim of financial abuse at the hands of her own grandchildren. They used my credit card to buy a car, she explained, her voice trembling with anger and hurt. When I confronted them, they said I was senile and didn't even remember giving them permission. Rose, the youngest of the group at 59, had escaped a terrifying situation where her daughter had been secretly drugging her in an attempt to control her behavior. I thought I was going crazy, she sobbed, until my neighbor saw my daughter putting something in my food. Listening to their heartbreaking stories, I realized that Andre was not an isolated case. Elder abuse by family members was far more prevalent than I had ever imagined. But I also realized something even more important, that none of us had to simply accept it. This is a place where you can take all the time you need, I told them during our first dinner together. There's no rush, no pressure, only healing. David had structured everything legally, so that the refuge was completely self-sufficient. The trust one had established provided ample funds for the property's maintenance and a small stipend for each resident. It wasn't charity, it was justice. The first few months were undeniably challenging. Margaret suffered from debilitating panic attacks. Elaine had developed a deep and abiding distrust of all banks and legal documents. And Rose was plagued by constant terrifying nightmares. But slowly, with patience, compassion, and mutual support, we all began to heal together. Margaret discovered that she had a natural talent for gardening and transformed a vacant plot of land into a thriving vegetable patch. Elaine, who had been an accountant before retiring, took charge of the refuge's finances with a meticulousness that greatly impressed me. Rose, who had been a teacher, started teaching literacy classes in the nearby town. Each of them was rediscovering her purpose in life, and in turn I found mine too. One autumn afternoon, as I was sitting on my porch watching Margaret working in the garden, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Ellington? The voice belonged to a young, nervous social worker named Patricia Wilson. My name is Patricia. I'm a social worker from General Hospital. We have a 75-year-old woman here who was brutally beaten by her grandson. We were given your number as a possible refuge. Of course, I replied immediately. When can you bring her? This afternoon. She has nowhere else to go, and the grandson is still threatening her. We'll be waiting for her. That night, as I helped the newest resident, a fragile woman named Carmen, settle into her cottage, I reflected on the long and winding road I had traveled. Just a year ago, I was a 60-year-old woman who had lost her husband and believed that her only purpose in life was to be a good mother to a son who didn't even love her. Now I was the director of a refuge that had helped 8 women rebuild their shattered lives. I was a woman who woke up every morning with a clear and unwavering sense of purpose. I was someone who had found inner strength in places she never even knew existed. The final word. 3 weeks later, David arrived with some unexpected news. Andre wants to see you, he said while we were having coffee in the kitchen. Why? He says he wants to apologize. His probation officer says he's been attending therapy and seems genuinely remorseful. I considered the possibility for a moment. A part of me, the part that had been a mother for 38 long years, felt a flicker of hope. Maybe Andre had truly changed. Maybe he had learned from his mistakes and was genuinely sorry for the pain he had caused. But then I thought of Margaret, Elaine, Rose, Carmen, and all the other women who had passed through my refuge with strikingly similar stories. I thought of the empty excuses they had heard, the broken promises of change, the second chances that had always turned into new opportunities for abuse. No, I finally said, my voice firm and resolute. I don't want to see him. Are you sure? Perhaps, David, I interrupted him softly. I've learned that forgiveness doesn't necessarily require reconnecting with the person who hurt you. I've forgiven Andre in my heart, but that doesn't mean I have to allow him back into my life. He nodded, understanding. Do you want me to relay a message to him? Yes. Tell him that I hope he finds peace and healing, but that he will have to find it without me. That night I sat on my porch as I did every evening at sunset, watching the lights flicker on in the cottages where my residents were preparing dinner, reading books, or simply enjoying the tranquil silence that comes with feeling safe and secure. My phone vibrated with a text message from Elaine. "Thank you for giving us a home where we can be ourselves again." I smiled, tucking the phone back into my pocket. Marcus had always dreamed of a farm where we could live in peace and contentment. But I had created something even better. A place where women who had lost their peace could find it again. Andre had tried to take everything from me. My money, my house, my dignity, my freedom. But instead he had inadvertently given me the most valuable gift I could possibly imagine. The opportunity to discover who I truly was when no one else had any power over me. I had lost a son, but I had found a family. A chosen family. A family built not with blood, but with genuine love, compassion, and mutual respect. And for the first time in 60 years I was completely and utterly free. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story.